I've got the recording going. So we all know the title of this. It's How to Survive the Holidays Without Gaining Weight and Feeling Miserable, because those are two things that many of us go through during the holiday season. Many of you know who I am. I'm a psychotherapist who specializes in food and body image issues as well as addiction. And I created this philosophy called the feel-good solution, which really comes about from the belief that I have that everything that we do, every action we take, including our very painful habits, is an attempt to reconnect to the peace, love, and joy that lives inside of us at all times, which some people call God and some people call other names like divinity or soul or essence or whatever it is. And so the feel-good solution is to help us find ways to access this peace, love, and joy without doing it in a self or other destructive ways. And so tonight I want to teach you two of my favorite feel-good tools from my feel-good toolbox. And I'm really excited because, it's taken me years to learn these two tools, and what's really exciting is that I get to give them to you tonight, and know that you will get a fairly broad teaching of these, and that if you want to learn more, of course, there's going to be ways for you to learn more. In terms of the holiday season, why am I here and why did I decide to do this? I'm like everybody else. I'm already overwhelmed. I had two friends call me today, and I was literally resentful of them. They didn't do anything wrong, but I was like, please don't call me because then I'm going to feel guilty and I'm going to have to return your call and I don't have time for you. And it was just amazing to watch that. And I thought, oh, I need to share that tonight. And these are like two of my best friends. And I felt resentful when I saw the phone ring. And, like you, Nancy, I've got so many parties to go to this weekend. I've got a wedding to go to on the equinox on the 21st. And so it's just a lot. And what most of us do with that, we're going to talk about. So what we're going to cover tonight is we're going to look at the social messaging that we have around the holidays. Then we're going to look at what actually happens for many of us during the holidays. And we're going to look at two concepts. We're going to look at the shadow, and we're going to look at the critic, rebel, good girl triangle, which some of you already know, and it's my favorite probably of all the things that I've created. We're going to look at how to work with these two concepts. We're going to do some practice scenarios, and then we're going to talk about next steps. So let's look at the terrain. And, I have an assistant named Hannah who is so fabulous at putting PowerPoints together. So I laugh every time I look at some of these slides. So look at this one. This is just one of my favorites. So message number one, you have to be perfect during the holidays. So you have to be the perfect hostess. You have to be the perfect family member. You have to be the perfect eater and exerciser. You have to be the perfect gift giver, and you have to be the perfect employee. So a couple examples for me is I was just away to Switzerland over last weekend to visit my family, and I ended up getting into a fight with two of my brothers, which I never usually do. So I was by no means the perfect family member, but let me tell you something, it was actually very freeing to get into a fight with them. Now the other one, the perfect gift giver, I actually have my daughter Sam sitting next to me, and she will happily attest, or maybe not so happily attest, that almost every Christmas in our household, somebody is disappointed by the Christmas giving. One year it was me. I cried because I didn't get any presents because I had said I don't want any presents. One year it was Sam because, we didn't order her gifts on time and they didn't arrive by Christmas time. It's just every year there's somebody. So gift giving, it's not just getting it right on time, but it's also with my three kids, I have no clue what they want anymore because they've grown up so much. And I just don't do a good job. And so they need to give me a list. And when they give me a list, then it takes all the surprise away from them, blah, blah, blah. It's just very difficult. Thank you, God, I don't have to be the perfect employee because I don't work for anybody. But I think many of you might relate to that. Another message that we get during the holidays is more is better. We are supposed to go to more parties, to do more gifts, spend more money, eat more foods, do more decorations. And it's just exhausting. To me, it feels like we already live in this culture of more. And so then it's, I already feel like I have too many clothes in my closets, too much food in my pantry. And then now we put more of it during the holidays. And what I love about it is not only are we supposed to do more, but concurrently, we're supposed to be perfect and be the perfect exercises and not eat too much food. So it's a very, very confusing message. More, but not too much. It's all very confusing. Message number 3, and probably the biggest one, is that we should feel peace, love, and joy this whole time. Today I was reading a Facebook entry and somebody said, may everyone feel the sweet, kind love of the Christmas season. And I apologize to whoever that was because I wanted to kill her and I wanted to stab her because I want to be able to own up that the holiday season is not only for peace, love, and joy, but that we actually have lots of other emotions that don't just magically go away during the holiday season. And so we have, and we'll talk more about that, but right, you all got it. Peace, love, and joy. We're supposed to be feeling that way more during the holiday season. So does any of this sound familiar to you? So actually, for me, this is the reality that I've seen with myself, with my clients, family, friends. Most of us actually overeat at holiday parties. We resent family members. We fight with loved ones. Suddenly you're put together with people that you see maybe once or twice a year. And it's really difficult because, I love my family, but it doesn't necessarily mean, I don't mean my close family. I mean my more, bigger family. We're not supposed to necessarily like each other. We can love each other, but suddenly we're supposed to all love and like each other. And old issues come up and we feel like, I felt like I became 7 years old again when I went to my family in Switzerland. So not easy to be with family members. We're stressed about gift giving, as we spoke about. We're trying to please everyone. We feel pretty gross in our bodies. Many of us, Nancy was talking about already being exhausted and already not feeling good. And, it's kind of not even started the whole holiday season. And then these are the feelings many of us feel. We might feel shame because we're not perfect. We're often exhausted. I've been exhausted all week. And it's one of the reasons I grew so resentful of my 2 friends calling me. It's like I have only a limited amount of time in order to do my practice and to go shopping and to get ready for these parties this weekend. And I'm just exhausted already. And it's which leads to the next piece, which is to feel overwhelmed. And then there's a lot of people who feel depression. Interestingly, today in the Denver Post, the article was holidays blues or depression. And they were talking about how, it's very difficult to tell, but many of us feel depression during the holidays, again, because we're told we should be happy. And when we're not, we can feel depressed. Now, the other thing is many of us have lost family members. Many of us are alone. And so the holidays, we see these images where everybody's so happy and so loving and they have a partner and they have their family around them and they're all happy. And if we don't have that perfect life, which of course nobody does, we can feel depressed. And depression is very much a part of the holiday season. And I want to really normalize it. Anxiety, right, about getting it all done right, and loneliness. I mean, it's to me sometimes, and I'm sure you can all relate, sometimes it's actually worse when we're surrounded by people. We feel more lonely than when we're by ourselves. So one of the things that happens, of course, because of all of this is our self-care goes down the toilet and we end up, not taking care of ourselves at all, way worse than we usually, we would during the year. So number one thing, if you take anything out of this webinar, is I want to just normalize it. And I want you to know that it's completely normal for us to be feeling this way. And I just wish that we could all be more open about it so that, we weren't expecting this perfection, that we would just all accept, yeah, it's actually probably a more difficult time of the year, not an easier time of the year. I also don't want to say, oh, it's a horrible time. I mean, I had so many moments during Christmas time, which are wonderful. And there are many moments which are also very difficult. And it's important to acknowledge that. So let's look at 2 concepts that can help us understand why it is so hard to go through the holiday season. Number one, again, look at these posts, these images that Hannah picked. I just love it. So number one, we're going to talk about the shadow. So the shadow is the disowned aspects of ourselves. It's our dark side, right? It's the not so pretty parts that we'd rather not look at or show, and certainly not own inside ourselves. So for example, if I were to look at some shadow pieces, well, it's not that shadowy, but I'm a pretty selfish human being. I have a tendency to do that. I also have a tendency sometimes, part of my shadow is still sometimes struggle with overeating. You know, I'd rather not own that. I'd rather not look at that, but it's there. Tonight, though, I'm going to specifically be talking about painful emotions most of us feel during the holidays, which we try to push away as far as possible. So when I say shadow tonight, I am going to mean the painful emotions like shame and anxiety and depression and loneliness. And we're going to look at how do we work with them. So it's already hard enough for us to feel these uncomfortable, painful emotions all year long, right? It's really difficult to feel some of these really strong emotions. But during the holidays, it's even worse, as we've talked about now, because we're expected not to feel them. So the more we feel them when we're not supposed to feel them, the more shame and anxiety and depression we feel, blah, 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 blah. It just goes into a very vicious cycle that makes everything worse. So what is the problem with having a shadow side? Well, when we don't own our shadow, when we're not aware of it, when we spend a lot of time and energy pushing it away, our shadow has a tendency to blow up right in our faces. So there's two ways that we blow up with the shadow. Number one is with either discharge it at others. So imagine all this energy building in your body of anger and anxiety and impatience and frustration, and it's just sitting in your body and you don't want to feel it and you don't want to feel it, and suddenly a car cuts you off or your partner says something to trigger you, and rah, I apologize, it's like vomit. You know, we just yell and blame somebody, so we discharge it at others. The other way that we do it, and women can often do this, is I've invented the word in charge. We in charge it at ourselves. So what that means is we take this energy and we turn it against ourselves. And this often involves very self-destructive behavior, like overeating, like punishing ourselves and criticizing ourselves. Again, this is why we fear these disowned emotions so much. They feel pretty big. Nobody's ever taught us how to work with them. And so, in fact, they're really dangerous. And many of us as children have experienced, or maybe as adults too, what it's like to be on the receiving end of somebody discharging their emotions. It's really, really scary, and we're really uncomfortable with them. So tonight, I'm going to give you a very specific tool to help you own your emotions without either discharging them or in charging them. Now, this concept, you know, I teach it at all my webinars, at all my presentations, all my trainings, because it applies to so many of the habits we struggle with, and applies really importantly to food and exercise, especially. So we're going to talk about the critic, rebel, good girl triangle. So we all have different subpersonalities, right? These voices in our heads. Actually, when I was sitting here, I was doing some paperwork while Sam was waiting for me, and I'm just talking out loud to myself. And she says to me, do you always talk out loud to yourself even when I'm not around? I'm like, oh, yes, I do. And, you know, I'll say, well, should I get something to eat? No, maybe I shouldn't get something to eat. I'm not hungry yet. And, you know, we have these voices. And, you know, some of these voices say, you know, what can I do to go take care of myself today? And this other one will be like, I just want to sit on the couch. So sometimes these voices are very paradoxical. But the primary voices when it comes to food and exercise are the critic, the rebel, and the good girl. So take a look at this triangle. So look at this triangle over there on the left side of the slide. So you will see the critic at the top. And the critic is the one that has all the rules. And we're going to go more deeply into each of these voices. I'm just introducing them with the triangle. Critic has all the rules, right? What you shouldn't do. The rebel, if you look to the left side of the triangle, is the one that fights all the rules and says, I don't like rules, and I'm going to blow them out, and I'm not going to listen to any of them. And then the good girl is the one that says, okay, I will do what you tell me, critic. And what happens when you look at this triangle is these voices are always in reaction to each other. The rebel and the good girl are always reacting to the critic. Whatever the critic says, either the rebel will say F you to it, or the good girl will say, I will do it. So let's go a little more deeply into the critic. So what's the job of the critic? The job of the critic is to try to keep you in line, right? It's the voice that says, you ate too much, you didn't work out enough, you're not thin enough, you're not good enough, you should work out more. You know, its favorite words are not enough and should. I mean, it just loves those words. But the thing with the critic, when you really look at it, it really works round the clock trying to protect you because it believes that for you to be truly happy, you have to be perfect. And it depends for all of us what that perfection is. For some of us, it's about being perfectly thin. For some of us, it's about having the perfect relationship. For some of us, it's about having the perfect job. It doesn't really matter. The critic believes in perfection and then works 24/7. I mean, for me, the critic is one of the strongest voices that any of us encounter. And when people really start owning how strong their critic is, because usually we just think it's our voice. But when we start going, oh, here's my critic, and we start noticing how much it's leading our lives and kind of watching everything we do all the time and judging it, it really blows me away. So what's the problem with the critic? Well, nothing's ever good enough. You will never, and trust me on this one, you will never, ever, ever be able to satisfy the critic's voice for long. Its standards just keep getting higher, right? So it's actually called, in some of the work I've done, it's called the ego ideal. So let's say your critic says you have to lose 5 pounds, then you lose 5 pounds, and then he goes, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't tell you, you have to lose 2 more pounds. And then you lose 2 more pounds, you know, or it tells you you have to eat just a salad for dinner tonight. And then you do that, but then it changes and just the demands just keep getting higher and higher. Other problem with the critic is that it's brutal. I mean, it's brutal. It uses relentless shaming and punishment to try to keep you perfect, okay? It would be lovely if it was kind about it because, you know, it's lovely to try to be perfect, kind of. But the thing is, it uses shame and punishment, and it can become, for many of us, a very abusive voice. Other problem, final problem with the critic, well, you know, there's many problems with the critic. These are the primary ones, is that it triggers the 2 reactive voices we spoke about. It triggers the rebel and the good girl, neither of which are healthy voices either. So let's move on to the rebel. The rebel's job, you know, Hannah very lovingly wrote, screw you, I say F you, because that's the rebel. The rebel says, I want what I want regardless of the, no, it's I want what I want when I want it, regardless of the consequences. The rebel wants pleasure. It wants to have fun, and, you know, is actually a lot more relaxed than the critic. But, you know, its attitude is kind of the FU attitude. The good news also about the rebel is it has the courage to stand up to the critic's sometimes insane rules, well, often insane rules. So some really incredible rebels where Nelson Mandela, Jesus, Martin Luther King, these are people who looked at what authority was saying about the way human beings were living their lives and deciding to say, maybe we need to change those rules, and we're willing to challenge authority. So what's the problem with the rebel? Well, the problem is that the rebel stands up to any authority, including positive authority. It does not know how to discern unhealthy rules versus self-caring rules. So when I started working with my rebel and with my critic started becoming softer and going, okay, maybe you don't need to work out 6 days a week for 3 hours, but what about 4 days a week for a half hour? The rebel just, it's kind of like a broken record. F you, F you, F you, F you. It just says F you to any rules. It hates rules. And, you know, probably the single biggest thing of clients who come in with, you know, to my office with overeating issues is their rebel is really strong and has stopped being able to discern what's a healthy rule versus an unhealthy rule. And so we will talk about how to work with that. Now, the other problem with the rebel is that the way it stands up to authority is usually through some self or other destructive actions, like eating the whole cake or the whole buffet or drinking the whole bottle of wine. So it's really, it doesn't often stand up. You know, Martin Luther King or Mandela, they stood up to the critic and to the authority by changing the rules, by doing incredible things. The rebel does not. The unhealthy rebel does not. And final problem with the rebel is hard to stop, because when you've been trying to hold on to what the critic tells you you need to do, and you try and you try and you try to be good, when the rebel finally wins over and you can have that whole buffet and that whole bottle of wine, it feels so good that it's actually very hard to stop once you get engaged with the rebel. Finally, the third voice is the good girl, and the good girl tries to do everything the critic says. And I see that I'm being obnoxious with my voice because I guess that's the way the good girl sounds like to me. But the good girl says, okay, I will only eat a salad today, and I will only exercise 3 hours, and I will exercise 3 hours today. I'll be perfect and kind to everyone. And she's just such a good girl. And she does. She truly wants to be good, and she wants to follow the rules that the critic sets out, whatever those rules might be. Now, remember, we spoke about the rebel. The rebel says F you to all the rules. The good girl says yes to all the rules as well. She's not discerning about what rules are appropriate and which ones are not. The good girl is the straight A student, the perfect child who's motivated and disciplined. So what's the problem with a good girl? Don't we want a good girl? Well, the problem is she tries to be everything to everyone, which is exhausting, and she can't last that long. She does not know how to relax and just be, because she's too busy, eating a salad and working out at the gym. She's willing to be shamed and abused until she gets it right, which, as we spoke about, actually never can happen. So she's just going to continue to be shamed and abused. She only feels good when she's perfect. And as you know, as we spoke about, it's almost impossible to be perfect. Well, it actually is impossible. So basically, she never feels good. She feels good for very, very small periods of time. And fortunately and unfortunately, she's not sustainable, because the rebel will eventually take over. The only time where I've seen the good girl be sustainable are with my clients who struggle with anorexia. Their rebel basically almost never takes over. Everybody else, the rebel eventually will take over. And thank you, God, right? Because actually just listening, having the good girl be on all the time can develop eating disorders like anorexia, can develop stress and exhaustion and heart attacks. So we actually don't want the good girl to take over all the time. So let's go to part 3, and let's figure out how to work with the shadow and the triangle, and how to not just survive but thrive during this holiday time. So strategy number 1, how to work with the shadow. We bring the shadow into the light. One of my favorite things anybody ever said to me was my roommate at the healing school I went to at Barbara Brennan. She said to me, Isabel, I believe that enlightenment, the only job we have to do for enlightenment is our job is to bring the shadow into the light, and then God takes over. And I remember being stunned by that, because I always thought that there was something to do with enlightenment. We had to become something or meditate for 25,000 hours a day. And what she was saying is, bring the shadow into the light, and then something miraculous happens that's kind of beyond our control. Our only job is to say, what is it that I keep hidden from myself and that I disown? And then something miraculous happens. And so, you've heard the expression, what you resist persists, right? The more you resist something, the stronger it becomes. Well, if that's true, then what you accept lets go. That's where I come from in saying that bringing the shadow into the light heals. Because by bringing compassionate awareness to your disowned emotions, just that sheer fact, that sheer action changes them. Now, we'll do a little more than that, but it's important to know that when you are at your family gathering and you notice yourself getting so pissed at Aunt Betty because she's taking over by talking too much, just notice, inside yourself, I'm so irritated right now because Aunt Betty's taking over. That is so much better than going, I shouldn't be feeling that. That's so bad. I should be nice to Aunt Betty. Aunt Betty's so nice. She gave me a present last year. All that stuff just clouds what is really just an emotion arising. I'm irritated right now at Aunt Betty. And that can do incredible transformation of that emotion. The other thing is to learn to feel and move these difficult emotions either without discharging them at others or in charging them. And that way you're going to learn to feel safe with them, and the people around you are going to learn to feel safe with you when you're not just throwing your emotions at somebody, which we often do during the holiday season, kind of like I did with my brothers. I apologize to them. So how do we do this? So I'm going to slow down a little bit here because this is actually a humongous chapter in my book. This is actually a lifelong practice, and I'm just giving you a taste of it that you can already start employing and that will hopefully really help you out. So one of the things that I realized when I was learning to work with painful emotions is we all have these core beliefs about certain emotions. So I had, because of what I grew up with, I had a core belief about anger, that anger was dangerous and anger was bad, right? Then I had a core belief about sadness, that sadness was weak, and that if I actually let myself feel sad, it was going to take me over and I was going to lose control and I was never going to stop crying. So we all have these beliefs about certain emotions. So what I learned when I thought, okay, I want to start learning to work with emotions is by removing what it was that I was feeling, by not calling it, oh, I'm feeling anger, but by only feeling the sensations in my body. It completely freed me up to just allow this emotion, which is energy in motion, this energy to move in my body, and then it always eventually moves on out. It's only we are the ones who go, oh, I'm feeling anger. Anger is bad. I shouldn't feel that. I'm going to hurt somebody with my anger. And then we push it away and then it comes blowing up some other way, or sadness comes. And same thing. When you actually say, let's take anger, right? I say, okay, oh, I'm feeling anger. So I'm going to remove that and I'm just going to go, I feel heat in my belly and I feel tightness in my heart and I feel constriction in my throat. When you just name them as sensation, amazing miracles occur because energy actually knows what to do. We are the ones who mess it up by thinking we have to do something about it. And so what I would like to invite you to practice is when you're feeling, let's say, and this has to be when you're on your own. You know, if you're at a party and you can say, I feel a lot of anger, but when you're on your own, notice what is happening in your body. And just name it. You know, for anxiety, for example, it's a tightening around the solar plexus. And sometimes it feels like the stomach is dropping. And I had a client who was really scared to feel anger. And every time she'd get near anger in our sessions, she'd be like, no, I can't. You know, I'm going to hurt somebody with that. And so I invited her to just work with sensations. And I'm not exaggerating. Within 10 minutes, the anger energy had just moved through her and she was done. I have an adolescent client who's been struggling with depression for years, and I invited her to do the same. I said, whenever you feel what you call depression, I want you to feel it, because before she was like, I can't feel that. I'm going to be sad the rest of my life. And she invited herself every time she felt this quote unquote depression, whatever those sensations were, to feel them. And I am not exaggerating, and I'm not telling you this will happen to all of you. Within 2 weeks, her depression was gone. It was absolutely unbelievable. So take this from what I'm saying. Take away what you call it, whether it's anger, sadness, move that away. Go into your body, feel the sensations in your body, and just observe them and let them be as long as they need to be. Let them do their stuff. They might move to your throat. They might move to your heart. They might move down your abdomen. Whatever it is they're doing, let them be. And then they will dissipate because they know how to heal and they don't want to keep living in your body. They don't want to keep being in there. They want to move through. So I want to make sure that you understand that. Ask me questions at the end because this is really important, and I will cover this more in the next webinar and the upcoming book, but just at least this is a good introduction to it. Strategy number 2 is, how do we heal this critic, rebel, good girl triangle, okay? The way to do it, you know, I used to think that I needed to get rid of the critic, I needed to get rid of the rebel, I needed to get rid of the good girl. In fact, we want to transform them into moderate voices. We want to transform them into healthy voices. So the critic, what is the healthy part of the critic? The critic becomes the positive authority. I'm actually thinking about calling it the loving authority because that's really what I'm talking about. So rather than having these mean, abusive, unattainable rules, we still need an authority. We can't just act out all over the place. Freud talked about that. We still need it. We still need an ego. We just need an ego that's positive and loving and kind and whose rules are attainable. So the critic becomes the loving authority, okay? And we're going to talk about specific examples. The rebel becomes the healthy rebel. The healthy rebel starts learning to discern what it is that the critic is saying and what is healthy and what's not healthy. So if your critic says you're going to go to a party tonight and you can't eat anything, the rebel can go, no, not going to happen. You know what? I really want some pleasure. I want to enjoy myself. I want to be social. But what I will do is I will just give myself one serving of the food as opposed to going to the buffet 5 times, which will make us feel like crap. So the rebel becomes more moderate and continues to discern and to listen to positive authority because if the rebel goes, I want to eat the whole buffet, and the positive authority goes, you know what, you're not going to feel good if you eat the whole buffet, the rebel starts being able to take that information in as opposed to going F you just because. That's the thing with the rebel. It says F you just because, right? And then the good girl becomes the moderate girl. Again, she goes, if the critic is going crazy telling her she needs to work out 3 hours a day and eat only 800 calories a day, the good girl is the one that goes, yeah, it's not going to make me feel good if I do that. I need to do something different. I need to be more moderate. And what I love about these voices changing is that, again, they are beautiful voices. They really are, even though they've become really kind of, it's funny, a funny word comes into my head, corrupted inside of us. But if we can get them to work for us instead of against us, we've got amazing, amazing energies. It's like the critic for me is like parents. If you've ever experienced an abusive parent, that's often what you've taken inside yourself. And to learn to be a loving parent is not a neglectful parent. A loving parent doesn't go, baby, of course you can have, you don't have to study and you don't have to go to school. A loving parent still has boundaries, and they're firm boundaries, but they're loving and they make sense, okay? So the other thing with healing these voices is these healthier voices are flexible and they're willing to change at different times of our lives, unlike their unhealed counterparts. For example, the critic doesn't change its rules when it's Christmas time or because you have a birthday party you're going to. It's always got the same inflexible, unattainable rules. The healthy voices, they change. So for example, what I want to say to you all over the holiday season, have a little bit looser boundaries with yourself. You don't have to work out as many days. I mean, first of all, the body retains its strength over a few weeks period of time, even if we drastically reduce our exercise. Make rules, make decisions that are flexible according to what the holiday season brings. The other day, I went to yoga because I really thought, I'd always do that yoga class, and I had just come back from Europe. And the whole time I was driving to yoga, I was like, I'm so tired, I'm so tired. And those times when you're really tired and you work out, you feel better. And then there are times when you're too tired and working out depletes you even more. Well, I got all the way to the yoga studio, which is 15 minutes away from my office, and I realized I was actually in that place of being too tired, and yoga was actually going to deplete me even more, and I had an afternoon filled with clients. And so I actually did a U-turn, and I came back to my office and I napped for 20 minutes. Now, 5 years ago, I would have never been able to do that. My critic would have either pushed me to go to yoga, or I would have, completely rebelled against it and eaten everything inside because I was just rebelling against the critic. So flexibility is one of the key signs that you've transformed these voices into more healthy voices. So let's look at a couple practice scenarios that you might be encountering. So one of them is you're at your company holiday party, you're stressed out and you're really hungry because you've just come from work and there's junk food everywhere and you just want to stuff your face and avoid and just have it all. She wrote avoid it all, isn't that funny? And have it all is actually what we meant. So the critic is going, don't eat any of it, it's bad for you. Look at Susie, she only has carrots on her plate, you should be just like her. The rebel is going, forget this, I'm just going to eat as much as I want, I'll finish the whole buffet. So what are you going to do in that time? Well, the healing response is first and most important. Notice what's happening between the critic and the rebel. Slow it down and go, okay, this is what my critic is saying, that I can't have any of it, and my rebel is going, F you. And then shift these two voices to the middle way, to what we were talking about. What would the positive authority say? What would the healthy rebel choose to do? So like we were saying before, the positive authority would say, hey, try everything, but just for me, this would be helpful for me, just do one plate. Don't get second, third serving, because almost 100% of the time for me, I actually don't need a second and third serving, and I just end up hurting myself and not feeling good. It's not because it's bad. It's not because I'm going to gain weight. It's because I'm hurting myself and my body and I'm not going to feel good. And so same, or the healthy rebel can go, yeah, I want to be really mindful. But remember, the rebel wants pleasure, and the rebel doesn't get enough pleasure. So the healthy rebel learns to have mindful, delicious pleasure consciously. And, you know, I always say this, if you make the choice to have whatever it is you're craving, let's say it's a piece of chocolate or ice cream, but you do it consciously with the intent to meet your need for pleasure and taste every bite, is going to be a really different experience than if you're stuffing your face because you're so busy reacting to your critics saying you shouldn't eat any of that. You know, the rebel for me always reminds me of the adolescent who is resisting the parent, whatever the parent says, even when the parent says has good rules. And, you know, the teenager does really stupid things because they're so busy just rebelling against the parent. That's what the rebel is like. So we want to use the energy of the rebel to be mindful and to have pleasure and to enjoy ourselves, but without the self-destruction of it. Another one is, you know, because of the craziness of the holiday season, you haven't exercised in days or weeks, you feel gross in your body, you just haven't had any time and it's stressing you out. So the critic is going after you saying, you lazy, terrible person, you're going to gain a lot of weight, go to the gym every day for the next 2 weeks for 3 hours each day. The rebel says, whatever, who cares about my routine, I'm just going to go out to dinner instead and order 2 desserts. So healing response, once again, bring awareness to these two voices and notice how distorted both of them are and how reactive to each other they are. That's what's so important. The rebel wouldn't be the rebel without the critic. The critic wouldn't be the critic without either the good girl or the rebel triggering it. So this is what's so important. Whenever you heal any of those voices, the other ones fall apart. You know, there's this thing called a role lock, and a very simple one is the sadist and masochist, right? They can't be a sadist without a masochist. They can't be a masochist without a sadist. Well, they can't be a critic without a rebel. They can't be a rebel without a critic. So whenever you work on either of those voices, you're working on both. So the positive authority would say, hey, what about if you go to the gym 3 times this week for 30 minutes? You know, maybe even find a really fun dance, you know, maybe find like a really easy class to go to. The healthy rebel, remember, wants pleasure. The other day I went to a dance class and I laughed the whole time. I mean, what a way to have pleasurable exercise. That is win-win. That's win for my positive authority, and it's win for my healthy rebel because I got to move my body and experience pleasure at the same time, okay? And finally, the navigating reactivity in relationships. So we were talking about that. You are frustrated, you're stressed out, you're overwhelmed. You see your partner, your child, your friend, whoever it is, and you just snap and you just discharge that emotion, or you in charge it by overeating. And this is what we spoke about before, is before you do that, even as you're driving home, I do a lot of work on myself when I'm driving home, be with the sensations inside your body and practice just letting them be. And for me, what helps sometimes, and I have a husband who does a lot of work on himself as well, is actually say to him, wow, I'm experiencing a lot of heat in my abdomen and a lot of tension in my heart. And there's a part of me that really wants to take it out on you, but I'm just staying with it. And sometimes having a witness can be really helpful. Now, not everybody can handle it. And there are times where my husband looks at me like I've got two heads and goes, what is she talking about? Or, this is too much information. I don't need you processing in front of me all the time. But I find that helpful. And this is why I find, seeing a therapist can be really helpful, because we have somebody who can be there with us as we learn to work with sometimes really, really powerful sensations. But it can be done, and the more you learn to do it, the more you remove like, oh, it's sadness, oh, it's anger, oh, it's jealousy, and just feel what's happening in your body, the more success you're going to have. Now, what happens, this is our final scenario, when your rebel wins. So let's say you have binge, you've eaten all the cookies, you've drank all the champagne, you haven't worked out. Now what? Now, this is what usually happens to us, and I'm sure you'll tell me this happens to you. Your critic comes in, and it is a perfect time for your critic to shame and punish you and call you all kinds of names. And then it tells you, and now tomorrow you've got to work out 3 hours, you only can eat 500 calories. And guess what that creates? It creates a rebel going, forget it. I'm going to do whatever I want. In between that actually comes a lot of shame and helplessness and hopelessness and depression. Because I'm telling you something, when the critic is going at you, there's no difference between that voice and an abusive parent voice. I was working with a client today, actually, who was telling me how scared she was of when her husband gets angry at her. And I just looked at her and I said, do you have any clue about how much stronger the way your critic yells at you? I said, compared to the way your critic yells at you, your husband's got nothing. I said, your critic is a 10, your husband is a 4. So it's really important to get to know this critic and to get to really see how brutal it is, and to learn to work with it and make it a positive authority. So when your rebel has won, what happens is the critic comes in, then we feel bad, then the rebel goes, well, forget it then. Since I've already messed up, I might as well go, and these rules are stupid anyway. And so we just get stuck in this painful cycle, which for many of us continues throughout all of the holidays. So instead, what I want to remind you is, one, bring awareness. Wow, my critic is really going after me right now. How can I be kinder to myself? And that's such a big difference, guys. This is so important. Kindness after making a mistake, and I'm putting mistake in quote unquote, is the single most important thing you can do to not actually keep yourself stuck in the painful cycle of repeating it again. Compassion. Hey, yeah, you ate too much at the buffet last night. Of course you did. The food was delicious. You were distracted by talking to everybody. How can you take care of yourself today? And this is where the third piece comes in. Do self-care, not the critic self-care, which would be to go work out for 3 hours and not eat anything, not the rebel self-care, which is, well, since I've messed up anyway, I'm going to keep messing up, but the feel-good kind of self-care that I teach, which is take a bath, maybe go take a walk for 20 minutes just to help your body digest a little more, take a nap, call a friend and just go, the holidays are such a hard time. Whatever it is, I promise you that kindness to yourself, even if you have acted out, a binge or not exercise, is going to heal and move you way faster out of that cycle than the critic, which will only trigger the rebel. So I really, really hope that you will remember that the next time that you've done some acting out. So let's sum it up. It's okay to experience difficulty during the holiday season. Number 2, allow your shadow, these painful emotions, and bring them into the light. Just own them. I feel these different emotions. And then when you work with them, then just go to the level of sensation. And then number 3, heal your critic, rebel, and good girl by finding the middle way of these voices. And I'm telling you, when your critic stops harassing you so much, a really different relationship shows up with yourself and with your body and with food and with exercise. So I want to tell you real quick about this, and then we'll go to question. I haven't talked about this at all yet. I'm going to be doing a 6-week webinar on my Feel Good solution, which is a very specific 5-step way to help you stop overeating. And so what I'm telling you this now because I just sometimes is good. I know that I go, you know what, I'm going to be done with personal process for the rest of the year because there's so much going on. I don't have time to really focus on personal process, but I really want, and not January New Year's resolution, I'm going to punish myself and deprive myself, but I really want to look at this issue that I'm struggling with food or with body image or with exercise. And so it's good to know that Isabel is going to be offering something in January. And so what I want to do is I'm just, I thought about giving you already a discount for it. You could sign up for it now, but I'm letting that go because it's too complicated. We're too overwhelmed already. But what I want to tell you is if you go to my website, to isabeltierney.com/holiday gift, you enter your name and email, and you're going to receive $100 coupon for the program, and then you will get the information. So that's really cool because the program is going to cost close to $500, and this will actually take $100 off that. I will also do early bird deadline, so it'll probably be less than that. But you know what? You've got little to lose. Put your name in, get the coupon. If you decide to do it, you'll get $100 off. And if you want to give me any comments or questions, if you want some support, my email is isabel@isabeltierney.com. Many of you already know my website. And you can also go to facebook.com/isabeltierneyofficial and twitter.com/isabeltierney. But I really hope that this webinar helped you kind of normalize the stresses you're feeling and has given you 2 tools that hopefully you can take with you for the next few weeks as you go through the holiday craziness. So what I'd like to do now is I want to open the floor if anybody has any questions and comments. And so I'm not going to unmute anybody. I'm only going to unmute people who are asking, who have the question mark up. And I would really, really love to hear from you and to hear your feedback and if this has helped and what you struggle with. So go ahead and ask, put the question mark up and come in and share. So one of the things that I see, which is always so interesting with webinars, is that it's difficult for people to open up because, we don't see the person next to us. We don't know who's on the call. And so, I completely understand if it's difficult for people to share. I love it because I just think it makes us all feel more normal to go, we're not alone in this. But, if people feel like they got enough and that they don't want to share, then I am fine to just end the webinar. But let me give you guys one more minute. Mary Sue, let me unmute you. Hold on. Hi, Mary Sue.
Hello. Very, very good. I enjoyed it tremendously, and I think I can put a lot of this to work in my life. I'm blown away by this idea. I really am, the ideas that you've given. And I can see this working in my life. It's amazing.
Yay, I love that. Well, it's so good, right, when it actually helps, what
yes,
you teach.
Yes. I had a lap band surgery a year ago in, it was February or March of 2010.
Yes.
And that has been my critic because I want to rebel against it. I did wonderful right afterwards because I was, I had a lot to lose, and I lost probably 70 pounds, but I have more to lose. But I think I started rebelling against it, like, oh,
Yeah.
sure, I'm only supposed to eat this much, and I'm only supposed to eat these kinds of
Yes.
foods.
Yes.
And I just, like, I challenged it. I mean, it
Yeah.
was just like I don't know why. And now this is probably explaining some of it.
Yeah, yeah, because you know what? No, we're all grown-ups. Nobody wants us to be the boss of us. Like if my husband tells me anything like you should, or I mean, I'm immediately rebelling. Even if
Oh.
and many of us who have any kind of trauma and invasive parents, we are so fast at
Mhm.
that. And so, yeah, so the thing, one of the tricks about the positive authority, the loving authority, is to find a deeper reason. I call it a soul-based reason
Mhm.
for choosing to eat well. Because if you make it about weight loss, then to me, that's when you're feeding the critic. Haha, funny pun of words. But if you are doing it from
Mhm.
a place of soul, so for me, over the years, I've learned that I don't, I am not any happier because I've lost a pound or two or this or that. When I'm happiest is when my body feels good and when my body feels energized and feels strong. I was bulimic for 20 years. I looked great on the outside, but I was deeply suffering on the inside. So I've kind of lost the belief that thinness is happiness because I've been
Mhm.
miserable and thin. But when I'm happy is when I take real, because the body receives us taking good care of it so fast, like it loves it. And so when I think from a soul-based reason, why do I want to eat this food versus you should, it's one of the ways we can wonderfully disarm the rebel. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I know when I was in high school, and I always fought weight from the time I was 6 years old. And my mother, bless her soul, she would she would kind of take a hold of my hips. She says, you always put it on right there, And she was watching me because she suffered from weight
That's right.
loss, and
Yes.
she did not want me to have to suffer.
Yeah.
And but I still had that rebelliousness
Yes.
against her.
Yes.
I made her the evil one,
That's right. The critic.
you know.
Exactly. Exactly. Exactly.
And I look at pictures of myself in high school. I think, wow, I always felt fat. I wasn't fat.
Yeah, I know, right? I know. Don't you wish somebody had told us that?
Oh.
And this is again, it goes to show how little our feeling fat has anything to do with the way we actually look. I mean, obviously, I
Mm.
work with anorexic women and they feel fat when they are a size 0, 0 or -2. So yeah, so that's beautiful. Thank you, Mary Sue. And just let me know if you need more support. And I'm so grateful for your having shared.
Thank you.
All right. Anybody else want to share before we end? I love hearing people's feedback and their stories. Anybody else feeling the need to share? All right. So listen, I will, I'm going to keep looking while I just finish up here. Again, if you want to go to isabeltierney.com/holiday gift, you can get the $100 coupon. Also, I will send out the recording of this probably in the next 48 hours. And it's really cool. We found a way to put it on YouTube. So you'll be able to, and it's unlisted. So only the people who signed up for the webinar will be able to listen to it. And, you can use it again and again, and you'll be able to both hear it and see it on the PowerPoint. So thank you so much for being on this call. I actually had a really, really fun time. And feel free to email me and let me know what you thought, if that feels more comfortable, isabel@isabeltierney.com. And I look forward to talking to you and seeing you and engaging with you again soon. Have a wonderful, wonderful night.